Hello. So I want to talk a little bit about global development and innovation and design and how they all come together. And I want to start by setting some basics. First, the idea of mission, whether it's of a nonprofit, of a philanthropy, of an NGO working deep out in the bush somewhere, that mission often relies on markets. And by that I mean the creation of public goods has come to rely very heavily on private goods, manufacturing, technologies. It's in health, it's the vaccines, it's the refrigerators, the lab equipment. We rely very heavily in the public sector on the private sector to make us things. And we see this is very clear in the creation of the public good of national defense. Think about how much money DARPA and the whole Defense Department and Pentagon spends on making sure that our soldiers have the very best equipment, the leading technology, that we have the very best and the most secure borders, at least in most places. And we rely very heavily and engage very closely the private sector to do that. Other causes, not national defense, but things like global public health, also rely very heavily on markets, but don't have that same kind of engagement. And designing and developing innovation and pushing progress into these is difficult for a couple of reasons, and I want to talk a little bit about that. So the markets that supply the field that I work in now, and that's public health, are often unresponsive to the needs of the practitioners and those that use the equipment and the products they produce, and they can also be very inefficient. When we talk about markets and inefficiency, the system is just not aligned in the most efficient way, so all participants get the most out of it. So there are sort of three big reasons for this, at least that I've found. This is not borrowing from some storied intellectual. This is just my opinion, so take it as that, please. The first is that the social value of an innovation for public health or development of some other cause, the social value that creates often far exceeds the value that the inventor or the developer can expect to receive in terms of private returns. The benefit to society is much greater than the benefit to the people and teams that actually drive it. And in the case of vaccines and immunization, the cost and time associated with going to get a vaccine and becoming immune to a disease, to an infectious disease, is often not as great as the value to society when everyone receives a vaccine and we can actually bring down the incidence. So this is one of the complications here. And the social value that accrues does not always go back to the person that does it. The second is a thing I call where know-how, like know-how, often outnumbers the use of good know-how. And what I mean by that is that disciplines and skill sets and capabilities often cluster in one sector or another. You know, there's not so many doctors that work at design firms, and there aren't so many ethnographers or mechanical engineers that work at the World Health Organization. These skill sets tend to clump away from one another. And what happens when both sides go to look at a problem, they see things from where they sit, and they see things from their capability standpoint. And so when you think, is a better product possible, or shouldn't this policy be different, depending on where you're sitting, that answer is also often know-how. And so that's a very important part of this. The third thing is that in this space that is driven mostly by donors and even by national governments, the buyers of the products that are often donated are not the users of the products. And in industry, we tend to design our products for the consumer, for whoever's going to be buying the product. We want to make sure that it's their values we represent. But here, the values don't match up. And so we have a lot of products that, and a lot of solutions that reflect the needs of the donors, but not reflect the needs of the people actually out in the field. And this has a lot of problems. When you leave markets really inefficient like this, several things happen. And when you go to jump into a new market like this, or you jump into a new cause like this to design a new solution, we see three really common things. And these are my friends I'm talking about, so this is not any insult to them. But the first is you see something that is technically brilliant. It's a beautifully designed engineering technological advance, but it is totally impractical for the application. This is an example of some friends of mine in Seattle. They developed a very high-powered laser beam that can detect female malaria-carrying mosquitoes from over 100 yards away, fire a laser beam that disables them, and they fall to the ground. This is their solution for malaria, and it's a fantastic design. I've seen it in work, and seen it in practice, and it works. It's fantastic. The problem is the people that live in the malaria belt around the world could never afford, repair, support this kind of thing. You know, maybe this goes on the embassy building, but certainly not out in the field where the people who are carrying the most burden of disease can actually make it, take advantage of it. But then on the other side, we see products that are really relevant in the field and could really solve big problems. The example I give here is Uniject. It's a pre-filled auto-disable syringe that would solve a lot of problems we have within the vaccine community. And yet, the way that it was designed almost solely from the theoretical and programmatic standpoint, with not enough attention paid to its manufacturability and its commercializing potential. And so we've seen this great piece of technology sit on the shelves for years now, and we've been using something else. And this is often because the methods and structures and strategies we have for coming up with these new innovations simply don't work there. And we try to copy and paste them, and they simply don't work. And so what this does, so these are these two examples, but there's a third that is much more prevalent, and that is that simply nothing happens. We may be technically capable of solving some problem. The solution may be very clear and obvious, as one that I'll show, but it simply just doesn't happen. And what happens is we get this less than best kind of legacy out in the field in the programs that we're running to try to help and reach millions of very at-risk populations. And this less than best has consequences. Not only are they underserved by what humanity is capable of, but also when these markets remain inefficient and unresponsive, they can actually over time get to the point where they are hurting the mission and actually hindering progress. And so now there are some, this is just a picture of some of my friends from Nigeria, but the issue here is about markets, and I want to talk a little bit about how markets work for this. There's a lot of talk that markets sort of give us the best of all possible worlds. If the market hasn't produced it, then it must not be possible. This price must be optimal because it's the one that we're all buying. And so we have a lot of belief in markets, and I too believe in markets, but I believe, and there's a growing legion of us that do, believe that markets are products of our own creation, albeit unintentional sometimes. It's about interests and information and capabilities and rules and incentives. And these things are shapeable to some extent. And so there are some activities to actually shape these markets in ways that better serve the mission. And one of them happens to be consolidating all the buyers of something and driving down the price, kind of a Costco approach to like bulk procurement. There are others to try to transfer technology to lower cost manufacturers. And there's also lots of examples of prizes, like the X Prize you see, to try to sweeten the pot for potential investors. These are great things, and I mean them no disservice here, but I feel that they are too limited, and they actually fall short of really restructuring the fundamentals of who is performing R&D for these causes. And so what I've been working on the past 4 or 5 years is another series of strategies that I call philanthropic market disruption, and that's kind of a silly term, I guess, but I'll explain it briefly. The idea is that we will actually, by bringing together public and private resources and capabilities, we will actually harness the reins of industry in the name of these oft-forgotten problems, and actually create a solution that is commercially viable, is manufacturable, is everything you'd want to see in a traditional product or service, but we will drive that process from the programmatic standpoint. We will sort of put the reins of industry in the hands of the program. And in essence, as you'll see, we want to actually disrupt that market. And I mean that in the same way that investors and entrepreneurs do in Silicon Valley and here, that the presence of a commercially viable product that introduces new values and really resonates in a new way can actually alter the fundamentals of a market. And so I'll walk through an example here of where we've been applying this since 2008. First, a little bit of background. The cold chain, which you'll hear me mention several times, is actually a temperature-controlled supply chain for the transport of temperature-sensitive goods like vaccines and specimens, also food and other things. And it's been really critical for all sides of development all around all around the world. And there's nowhere more important than the delivery of vaccines. The expanded program on immunization that the World Health Organization administers has been around for about 30 years, and it delivers vaccines to 103 million children 3 times within the first year of life. It's an unbelievable program that operates in over 100 countries, and now the Decade of Vaccines initiative the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has just started is increasing coverage in these countries to over 90% and introducing lots and lots of new vaccines to the standard dose, and takes the price per dose per child from $5 to $50, a full factor of 10 increase. So this is only an increasingly important realm. And so you'll see the vaccine supply chain here is actually all the way from the manufacturer to the end patient. And you'll see here what I'll be talking about is actually just the last mile, as we call it. So we focused our efforts. It's you get all the way out to the health clinic, and it's from the health clinic to the actual family, to the parents, the child. And this is the most critical, in my mind, the most critical part of the chain, and yet it is where over 90% of the failure occurs, and it is also represents the smallest market. And so, as you can tell, if you're going to endeavor into new cold chain activities, this is not maybe where you would invest your resources. But what's interesting about this space is that it is extremely important, it's extremely valuable to countries and donors, and yet there are some real problems. And so in 2008 we began investigating, and we formed a low-profit limited liability company known as an L3C, which is a new type of legal structure in the United States. To basically what it does is it takes the LLC structure that many of you are probably familiar with, and inside it, it puts what you would normally see inside a nonprofit, that same commitment to the cause and purpose, and that's all wrapped up in the filing at the state. And so what this does is it gives the managers of these companies a fiduciary responsibility, not just a contractual one, but a fiduciary, the highest kind of responsibility, to put the mission above any profit in cases where they conflict. But this is done in a for-profit structure, so it's very interesting how it builds these words together. It builds these worlds together, and so number one, you can align the interests of different parties and also build trust. And doing this, I went to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention here in Atlanta, and we formed a cooperative research agreement to study cold chain and to jump into this philanthropic market disruption kind of strategy. We brought on manufacturing experts and designers, engineers, economists, built a big team of people to go and investigate this. And we started a research program that looked at these seven ways in which cold chain creates value and where it fails and how it does. And we wanted to connect these disconnects that we often see. And so here you have, this is a simulation of one of the baseline containers, one of the ones that's used almost ubiquitously throughout the world. This is a quarter view of a vaccine carrier. We built these 3-dimensional finite element analysis models and conducted all kinds of tests in the lab to sort of deconstruct what was going on. And what we found was that over 70% of the cargo was freezing. And freezing is bad. I can explain quickly that when you freeze a vaccine, there's no way to know it's been frozen. And so you end up administering blank vaccines to children if they've been frozen. And this is something that is, not the first thing that comes to mind when you're delivering vaccine in Africa. You want to keep it real cold, but here we keep it too cold. And this is for a variety of reasons, but you can see this is the temperature curve here. So when you pack the vaccine, it freezes down to -5°C, and it goes all the way up. And when you open the container, you don't even know that it's been frozen. This is a real challenge. The second thing is that these existing cold chain containers seem to really neglect human factors. They were too difficult to pack, as you see in the one picture, and also they're very difficult to open, and so healthcare workers would leave them open. Now, it doesn't matter how good your insulation is, if you leave the container open, it is not going to do the purpose. The third big lesson is that the market was simply not competing to solve these problems. In fact, we did a historical analysis of the price, and we mapped it against the function, and we found that there was absolutely zero statistical correlation between price and performance. A very bizarre market, but we found lots of fat in the market also, products that were far more expensive than what you would pay for a very similar product in another market. The final big conclusion was any solution was going to have to fit within this global infrastructure of equipment that already exists. So we sought to design a solution, and you can see these are some of the methods that we used to do that. And although the space is very complex, we developed a solution that was very simple. We simply engineered a barrier between the ice and the cargo within a standard kind of environment. And this served two purposes. One, it changed the user interface, where it forced the user to place the ice where it goes and the cargo where it goes. It changed the spatial reasoning in a way that it became more intuitive, but also you can't close it unless it's packed correctly. The next thing that this did is it gave us a barrier that we could engineer. So we engineered a very high-performance kind of barrier to control the transfer of heat inside, to prevent freezing while it's still extending the cold life. This dual lid here, as you can see, allows people to access the cargo without exposing the entire the ice of the container. We found this is a huge boost for effective cold life in the field. We translated the same design to a larger cold box, which performs very similarly. We did we really wanted to keep environment at the table as a stakeholder. It's often neglected, sort of voiceless in that way, and we developed a green urethane product that removed all of the petroleum and really dramatically improved the carbon footprint of these products by over 8,000% in the case of the cold box. This is, I consider, a breakthrough for the field itself of alternative insulation materials. But performance-wise, lots of statistics to share, but the most important, in tests where you couldn't freeze the vaccine, but you wanted to see how long the cold life would last, our products produced 641% increase and a 492% increase over what the market is currently using, what you find in the field. We tested these products in the field in Nigeria, Namibia, and Bangladesh, and other places, and found really wonderful results. The users loved them. And so I want to, before the time runs out here, I want to go through a couple of the lessons that we've learned. I don't often quote William Starbuck. In fact, I never have. But I think this is a pretty interesting quote. The best way to understand a complex system is by interfering with it. And that's exactly what we did in this case. Lots of people look at cold chain, and lots of people look at these problems, but nobody had actually teamed up with the field, with end users and with epidemiologists and laboratorians, and said, okay, we're all going to sit and we're all going to design this. We did that, and by trying to disrupt the market supplying the system, we created new knowledge about the system itself. As many of you entrepreneurs in the room know, that new knowledge can help inform the development of products that are of non-obvious importance. And that's what we're all looking for, right? How can we solve a problem that is important in a way that is non-obvious and hasn't been thought of already? So where we are today, we are in the process of commercializing these products with the Gates Foundation and with the manufacturer here in the United States. And we are pursuing that just now. The project just ended, so we're still in the way. But before we even bring the products to the market, the research that we've shared with the World Health Organization and UNICEF has already gone into the informing and the creation of a new product category of ones that don't freeze vaccine. So this is already beginning to shape the market that we work in. So I would say, just to close, that I would argue that this represents the best use of our industrial and human resources. It's an important expansion of philanthropy in our society. And this field of designing mission and strategy all into one single product is really something powerful and should be considered its own line of work. It's not a solution for every problem, but I think that if we can succeed in reinventing how we work, both from the policy side, but also the entrepreneurial side, the supply side, we have the ability to find new markets for our skills and products, and in the process, do our part to make the world a little bit safer and a little bit healthier for everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.